Hello, and welcome back to Dwayne and Nidia, Food, Travel, and Fun. And today we're going to make a very easy but delicious crock pot meal. It's called Cacoila, and it's a Portuguese pulled pork. And we're going to do it in the crock pot because I think it'll come out nice and tender this way. In fact, I tried it once and I loved it. Now, if we weren't using the crock pot, I would recommend taking the pork loin, and we'll get into the ingredients in a minute, and marinating it overnight before cooking it on the stove. But today, because we're going to do it low and slow in this crock pot, we really don't need to marinate it. It'll have plenty of time to really marry the flavors. Now, I am going to start with a 4-pound package of pork loin roast. And I'm going to be cutting that into chunks before I put it in the crock pot. But the other ingredients you'll need will be 2 chopped onions. You'll need some black pepper, some salt, some crushed red pepper, a little bit of ground cinnamon, a little bit of Portuguese I think they call it saffron or safflower. No, it's safflower. It's very different than saffron. Some paprika. I use a little bit of the Italian herbs. You can use also oregano if you prefer. You'll also use some red cooking wine, but actually any wine will be fine. Some red wine vinegar, a 15-ounce can of tomato sauce, and some minced or fresh garlic. All right, so first things first, I'm going to take this meat and I'm going to cut it into chunks. And then the way we build this is by throwing everything into that crock pot. Very, very easy. It's definitely a set it and forget it until you smell it. And it smells fantastic while it's cooking. And I'll show you exactly how to make cacoila. So here is my 4 pounds of the pork loin roast. Now, a little bit about cacoila in general. It's a very regional recipe, or a very regional food, which is to say that depending on where you are from in Portugal or in the Azores, or even recipes passed down from family to family, I don't think any two cacoilas are actually alike. So they're all just a little bit different. They're all really, really good. But the hallmark is that it's very, very tender meat. Now, I'm choosing to use pork loin. You can also use a combination of pork loin, and or beef. Some people add a little bit of liver to the mix for a slightly different flavor, depending on the recipe that they're using. You can also use country-style ribs, any kind of pork, any kind of meat. I've seen some people even do it with regular ribs and just cook it up cacoila style, and it comes practically right off the bone. But anyway, without further delay, here's how we make ourselves a delicious cacoila in the crock pot. All right, so here are 4 pounds. I did cut it into chunks. I did not trim the fat. That fat is going to add a lot to the flavor in here. And put that in there. Right in there, right into the crock pot. Next thing I'm going to add, and believe me, in my family, people don't typically measure out things. I'm doing it because I'm trying to teach people how to make these. So I'm going to be giving you some estimates. But I'm going to be adding minced garlic. I'm a fan of minced garlic. I really like how it tastes. You can certainly use fresh garlic. I'm going to add about 4 tablespoons, actually maybe a little bit more, but it's about 4 tablespoons. And certainly, you know, do it to your taste. That was pretty much everything I had left in this jar. And it's about 4 tablespoons. Next thing is salt. This one I'm not really, I'll say maybe 2 teaspoons. 2 teaspoons ought to be about right. Right into the crock pot. Next up, about 1 or half to 1 teaspoon of some crushed black pepper or white pepper. You can actually use any pepper you like. I prefer black for meats. I'm going to add a bit of these crushed red peppers, crushed hot peppers. You can use the red crushed peppers that we find in the in the stores around here that sell Portuguese items. They call it pimenta moída. I would say this is a teaspoon also, teaspoon and a half. Remember, always do your recipes to taste. And I'm not one to measure, so once you taste it, you just adjust. Paprika is like a hallmark of Portuguese cooking. I'll add about a tablespoon. Okay, I'm going to add a cup of red wine. You can use cooking wine, drinking wine, any kind of wine. There we go. This is about a cup. I'm going to put it all in here. I'm actually finishing off a lot of my pantry items today. I'm going to add about a half teaspoon of a little bit of these Italian herbs, or you could just put a little bit of oregano. I just like the savory, herby flavor that it gives to these meals. A tiny smidge of cinnamon, very tiny, maybe an eighth or a quarter of a teaspoon. You don't want to over cinnamon it, but if you don't put the cinnamon in, it just doesn't taste the right way. A pinch, just a pinch of the safflower. This one is one I brought back from San Miguel on a recent vacation there. Actually, not that recent, it's been a couple of years, but you can find these in some of the Portuguese markets, or certainly you can order it online. Two medium-sized, two almost large, diced white onion. Throw that right in there. All of that onion. One can of tomato sauce right here, right over everything. Okay, next up is a quarter cup of red wine vinegar. This I will measure out. You don't want to overdo it on the vinegar either. There we go. The vinegar adds a brightness to it. That little slight acidic bite just really, really works. This is all in just the crock pot. All I did was put this in the crock pot. I'm not going to touch it at all for a long time. I will top it off with one bay leaf. And I always like to find a big, huge one because then it's easier to remove. One bay leaf. Now, I'm going to put this in the crock pot. I'm going to set it on low, and I'm going to let it go for about 6 hours, maybe a little more, depends on how tender it is. I put the meat in chunks, so I'll be able to hopefully shred it with a fork. It should be really soft and really, really tender. Probably every couple of hours, I'll give it a swish with a spoon, and I'll show you what that looks like as we move forward, okay? So that's how you pull together. It's such an easy thing to do, and it's so delicious. And I'm going to put this in the crock pot right now, and then come back and just kind of give you a highlight about cacoila and how you can eat it, and how you can enjoy it. So I've put the cacoila meats and ingredients in the crock pot. I've turned the crock pot on low, and now I'm just going to let that go all afternoon, basically. So one thing about cacoila, it's something that people eat all the time. It's especially something that you find when people are having holidays and parties. They always like cacoila. Best way to have cacoila, in my mind, is on a pop roll. So I did buy some Portuguese pop rolls. And usually as a garnish, when you make yourself a cacoila sandwich, I use the red hot finger peppers, those long Portuguese peppers in strips, and put it on the meat, put it on the bread, and that's how we're going to be eating it today. All right, so we'll see you back when the meat starts bubbling away in the crock pot. So it's in the crock pot. I've given it a quick stir. And again, this is what it looks like now. And we're just going to let it go for about another 5.5 or so hours, maybe even longer, depending on how tender the pork gets. Here's a closer look. Okay, so we're not too far into this, maybe about an hour, maybe an hour and 15 minutes. I'm going to give it another stir. Oh, it smells amazing. You can really smell the wine. And 8 hours later, it is done. I took a fork and just kind of shredded. It's nice, it's saucy. And I'm going to let it go for a little bit to marry some of these flavors now that the pork has been shredded. And then I'll show you how to make the best sandwich in the world. Folks, it's done, and now I'll show you how to make a delicious cacoila sandwich. Hey everyone, so you saw that I finished it, put some in a bowl here, and I put it on a Portuguese pop roll with some red hot finger peppers for a classic cacoila sandwich. Looks really good. Let's give it a taste. Delicious. Just like I grew up eating. So, anyway, thank you so much for watching. And make some cacoila. Let me know what you think of the recipe. And if you haven't, please subscribe. Hit that thumbs up. And we'll see you on our next cooking or travel adventure.